So just put your little hand up online if you want to ask a question at that point. But over to you and your team, James.
Kia ora, Mayor, thank you very much. Kia ora koutou, everybody. So today's briefing is one of our regular series of briefings on the Ngākau program that was instituted following the approval of the additional funding for the Town Hall development in October last year. And so we'll cover all aspects of what's happening in Ngākau, but we're going to particularly focus today on the cab mob site, which is the old central admin building and the old municipal office building. We have a full program of work underway across Ngākau, and all of the projects within it will contribute to reactivating the precinct, which is we fondly call the heart of the city, and certainly over the next 5 years there's a number of milestones where we can all see progress being made. We'll all be able to see great progress being made in re-enlivening that precinct. As you know, last year Council tasked the team with going away and running a procurement process for the redevelopment of Cab and Mob, and to report that back to Council on the outcome, and that's basically what we're doing today. That's the main focus of the presentation today. The team is very excited about the outcome of this process. We believe the successful proposal will make a significant and major contribution to Ngākau Civic Square, bringing economic and community life back to the southwest corner of the precinct, and connecting the precinct into surrounding streets, Wakefield, Victoria, Mercer, and the business and residential areas around it. And one of the key reasons for bringing this back to Council today and doing this as an open forum is to ensure that we're being completely transparent about our plans for the site and what we're doing there, so people can understand what decisions are being made and what progress is being made. There's a lot more work to do, though, after today to work through the details for the site, but we were very keen for Council and community to understand that we've reached this important first milestone. Cool. So today, primarily about overview of Cab Mob, and then an update on the other Ngākau program and projects. The next steps following today's briefing will be for us to take a paper to Council next week on the 18th of April for approval to enter into a negotiation for the Cab Mob development. And then prior to June 24, or in June 24, we'll bring a draft of the Ngākau development plan to Council as well. So as I said up front, the Ngākau work is gaining momentum. There's a lot going on across the precinct. All of the projects within it will contribute strongly to the objectives of the Ngākau framework and revitalising this part of the city. There's a lot of milestones that will be achieved over the next 5 years, and we will have completed quite a significant transformation in 5 years' time. The Tamata Pihi project, the old Central Library, continues on time and on budget, and we are in the process of concluding major work on reprogramming the Town Hall project following the changes and decisions in October of last year. And since we last briefed Council in December on Ngākau, we have completed the procurement process for Cab Mob. We have progressed the Ngākau development plan, and we have, as you know, secured an agreement with Victoria University to lease levels 3 and 4 of Tamata Pihi, which now enables the full establishment of the National Music Centre. And just on that, we are still working through the final T's and C's with Victoria University on that. So just a reminder, I'm sure you're all completely aware of the Ngākau framework, but basically continues to guide our work with the vision that Ngākau is the beating heart of the capital city, thriving neighbourhood for creativity, culture, democracy and discovery and arts experience on the edge of Te Whanganui-a-Tara. And there are a number of different objectives that are stated in that Ngākau framework, which are front and centre for the team working on the program and all of the decisions that we're making. I mentioned about a draft master development plan that we'll have ready in June 24. This will provide more clarity on how we are embodying the vision and objectives of the framework in the actual physical work in Te Ngākau. And it will show also how all of the projects are becoming integrated together into a whole. WHOLE, whole. Sorry. Okay, so just going now really to focus on the cab mob process. There were a number of previous decisions by council that led to this procurement process. In December 2020, council agreed that the preferred option was to demolish the mob building and partner with a private developer to rebuild, and that would be included in the 21-31 LTP. In June 21, the LTP was adopted with mob demolition retained as the preferred option. In October 21, the Te Ngākau Civic Precinct Framework was presented and adopted by Council. In October 23, there was an agreement to progress with a procurement process for the redevelopment of the cab and mob sites. In November 23, there was an agreement to bring forward funding from next year's annual plan to accelerate the demolition of the cab building in order for us to get the work done as soon as possible to enable the town hall to open. And in December 23, we began the procurement process. So the mob cab procurement process is now complete. The RFP, request for proposal, was released to the market in December, and we received 4 compliant responses. Sorry. The RFP was focused around a number of requirements, and specifically that we were looking for a private developer to fund and undertake the development. So the intent was very much that council does not carry the risk and cost of developing on that space. Obviously, some of the thinking there is as a result of the significant investment we've already made in buildings in the square and some of the risks that we've taken on and the challenges we've faced. So it was very important that we look for private development funding to basically bring to life replacement of building in that space. We wanted something that was going to fully unlock potential of the site and provide broader economic outcomes, and we were quite open about allowing the respondees to detail what they thought they could do there. Whatever was proposed needed to fit with the Te Ngākau Precinct vision as highlighted in the framework. It was also important to deliver on the integration aspects of working with the town hall and enlivening the National Music Centre and the requirements around that as well. And it was important that we are able overall to reactivate the precinct with a range of different building issues. So as a collective group of buildings, there would be a number of different uses across them, from the library to the gallery to the town hall. And the aspects of the proposal that added to that and created additional uses and additional life in that precinct was considered really important because we're really looking for all of these buildings to enliven that as a key beating heart space within the city. So the result of the procurement process was the selection of the precinct proposal, or the proposal from precinct, as the strongest across the various different criteria and objectives of the RFP. In particular, the strengths that stood out from the precinct proposal it had the least development and funding risk to council. And as I said, that was one of the absolutely key criteria. The next steps with this process are to go into negotiating final terms and conditions. So as we go through that process, we will close out any potential or residual development and funding risk to council as we close out those final T's and C's, and then we'll come back to council for approval of those when we get to that point. But the intent is very much that this remains a no cost and no risk development for council. So the precinct proposal also had very strong activation and placemaking ideas within it, which were very much in line with the vision for Ngākau as a cultural and civic centre. The procurement team was also impressed with the ideas that precinct brought to the table in terms of how the ground and first floor spaces could be used to deliver both the integration requirements with the town hall, but also enabling other uses alongside those in order to minimise any long-term leasing costs to council for those spaces. And the other thing that came through strongly in the precinct proposal was the proven development and construction capability of the precinct team and the relevant other buildings and case studies that they have shown us around the country, references they've shown us around the country, particularly in respect to the work that we're thinking they're going to do with us on MobCab, the work they've done with the Auckland Council on the Wynyard Quarter and Commercial Bay is particularly relevant to what we're looking for in terms of capabilities for this job. We should point out that none of the proposals we received were able to give us planning confidence that they could be completed in time to be in sync with the town hall opening in hopefully early 2027. And given that all of those proposals basically said that, you know, the conclusion that we come to as a team is it is just not feasible to complete that any of the different options for cab mob to line up with the town hall, which means that we'll be looking at some alternate options. And if you recall, when we spoke to you in October, we had a couple of fallback options anyway for the town hall front of house if we were not able to complete this development in the time frame. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the procurement process. A process like this, integrity is really critical. We have multiple private organisations, significant private organisations competing for this opportunity. So it's really critical that we follow a process that is robust, auditable, well proven. And that's exactly what we have done. The proposals were all individually assessed and collectively moderated by a panel, and the process was overseen from woe to go by an independent probity auditor. We have a paper from the probity auditor, which will be included in the council paper next week, and the summary assessment from the probity auditor is basically as presented on the slide there, which I think is important for us to understand. So the auditor is saying that the process and documentation as designed were consistent with our policies, with audit office procurement guidelines, with public sector best practice, and incorporated the necessary probity principles. The implementation of our process was consistent with these principles and minimised the risk of failure due to weakness in the process, ensuring no party was treated unfairly. Ethical behaviour was practised throughout, and the process was guided by principles of honesty, fairness, integrity, trust and respect. And given the significance and high-profile nature of this process to WCC and the public, potential probity risks were identified in real time, planned for and mitigated when needed in real time. Okay, so some of the key aspects of the preferred proposal from Precinct is the demolition of both the cab and mob buildings to be undertaken by council, which is according to what we have planned and allocated funding towards. Mob and cab to be replaced by a new development which will increase the spaces and connections in particular to the streets and residential and business premises around the square. The ground and level 1 space will have a strong civic and cultural focus with the integration into the town hall to meet the front of house town hall requirements. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Precinct own a workspace business called Generator. So the idea and thinking is that that generator space will also be brought in to kind of co-share with some of that lower space in the building, and that enables the cost to council to be reduced for that space. It also brings in a focus on creative startups and SMEs into that space as well. And there will be a hospitality and retail element to the development as well. The upper levels of the building would be for commercial leasing and or residential accommodation, and obviously we will work with Precinct on what those plans will be as we go through finalising T's and C's. In terms of sustainability, it will be Green Star 5 or above, and the intent is the development would maintain or increase the net green space in the Ngākau Square. And there we're thinking in particular around the Mercer Street access into the square, which at the moment, if you can picture it in your minds, we've got the CAB building and we've got the Tamarapihi building with the new piece that's been built onto the side of the Tamarapihi building. So that's quite a narrow space, the beginning of Commonwealth Way. So the idea is to try and open that up a bit more with a bit more green space, and that's one of the areas where we're going to be able to do that, which will make quite a transformative look to the entrance into Ngākau Square. Okay, there's a couple of images here. Understand that these are very indicative and conceptual only. So this is a cut into the building looking from that Mercer Street area where I was just talking. If you're coming into the new building from the Mercer Street area, this is kind of like what you'd be faced with conceptually. Obviously, as we go through a process with Precinct, finalise T's and C's and then get into design, these things will be adjusted and designed accordingly to fit with the requirements and the ideas of Precinct. Next one, buddy. So that's a higher level view, a bird's eye view taken again from on top of Mercer Street looking down onto where the new building will be. It's a cutaway, so it's basically showing the kind of ground floor, first floor area of the space and how that is designed to integrate into the west hall of the town hall, which is just in the diagram there, it's just basically a blank wall, but we're completing the design of the west hall space with the town hall. That's one of the updates we'll talk about later, and this design of this building will click into it. And then the last picture is a kind of bird's eye view from over Jervois Quay, looking down on the building and Ngākau Square with the town hall, Tamarapihi and the gallery, all on the other sides of the square around it. As I say, these are just purely indicative and conceptual only, so there is a design process that needs to be gone through until any of that is finalised. Next steps in regards to procurement is that the procurement process is now complete. Respondents have been notified. For the preferred respondent precinct, the next step is for us to negotiate with them. And for the non-preferred respondents, we will take steps to give them feedback on the process and the outcomes of the process. There'll be a paper to council next week on the 18th with a recommendation, excuse me, to proceed to negotiate a development agreement with Precinct Properties. And we are intending to do a media briefing straight after this briefing today. Given that this is a public briefing, we thought it's important that we're able to provide the media with some further details and information and answer some questions. Okay, so that's the end of the MobCab section. I'll now go into an overview of the rest of Ngākau program. So on the slide here is really a summary of all the different elements of Ngākau. So Tamarapihi remains on track for completion in Q1 2026. The Town Hall is on track for completion in 2027. I've just talked to Cab Mob. The anticipated completion and the indications that we've had from Precinct Properties during the RFP process is that we should be planning for a completion of that new building at the end of 2028. And I did talk earlier about the Ngākau Master Development Plan. We have been through a process of design competition. A draft plan is underway at the moment, and that will be presented to Council in June 24. And that is the plan that will show how we pull all the pieces together and we finish off the square, etc., and make it all an integrated whole. And some of the other buildings in the Ngākau precinct and the progress of those. So the old Capital E building and City to Sea Bridge, which is numbers 7 and 8 on the little map there. As you're aware, the MBS of both buildings is below 34%. We have a regulatory date to do something with the Cap E building by June 2027. We have a draft detailed seismic assessment, or DSA, for the City to Sea Bridge of 20%. So that is still going through a finalisation and peer review process. The preference in the current LTP consultation is for demolition of those buildings, given the initial very high-level estimates we have of the various different options for Capital E and City to Sea Bridge. The fix and or reconstruct options were extremely expensive for council, hence putting in the option in the LTP of demolition. But the development plan that we come back to you with in June will help us determine what should replace those two buildings. The Ngākau basement and the square above it, so the area where people congregate before they do various different things like marches or graduate celebrations, etc. So that big green area in the middle. We've had, again, a draft detailed seismic assessment of 20% for that. We have looked at options for remediation, and they will be included and presented as part of the development plan. And we feel that there is a realistic option to strengthen at a cost that is within the amount that has been budgeted in the LTP. And if we are to go ahead with that, that should be completed in Q2 2026. We're still working through with the project team around Ngākau to see whether or not that can be brought a little earlier, because ideally we would like to open Te Marapihi with its beautiful new entranceways onto the square, with the square complete and the landscaping all done, etc. Even if we still have hoardings up around the cab mob site and the town hall site, we at least want to be able to open onto a nice square when Te Marapihi is opened. And similarly, the City Gallery, there is a significant amount of deferred maintenance we've talked about before on the City Gallery, and some limited seismic work that's required. We do have a draft DSA of 20%, and we have a draft occupancy safety assessment done, which basically says that the building is quite safe to occupy. The work required to get that building up to at least 34% of MBS is relatively straightforward, so we feel it is achievable within our budgets to do the necessary fixes to City Gallery. The work would be done in parallel with the demolition of Mob Cab, because obviously Mob Cab demolition is going to cause noise and impact to City Gallery. So the plan is to close the City Gallery for a period of time during 2025, and again to reopen it fixed and completed with the reopening of Te Marapihi, with also the completion of the square at the same time. So that Te Marapihi, the gallery and the square itself can all be opened and will be in their new condition. We've talked earlier about the creche, and as you're aware that the creche have agreed to an early release from the lease there, enabling us to do work and remediation on that building. We've talked in the past about the Michael Fowler Centre, which has a 20% MBS on it. We have a regulatory date of September 29 to address that, and we intend to have options back to you by the middle of 2025. The complexity of working through the potential options for MFC means that it's quite a large piece of work. And we have got funding in the LTP to conduct that work so that we can ascertain what are genuine workable options and options that we can have some confidence in the cost of, so that you can make a decision on what you want to do with that building. And finally, Jack Islet Green, there's currently no scope or plans to do anything with that space. Okay, Te Matapihi. So there's really not a huge amount to say about Te Matapihi, except everything's going really well. It is a large complex project. It is now 60% of the way through the piling work and basement foundation work, the most complex part of the project. In terms of the commercial arrangements for the work on Te Matapihi, we are now at what we call separable portion 5, which is the fifth and final element of the construction contract. And when that's complete, we will in essence have fixed price the entire project. So we're within 90+% fixed price now, and the completion of SP5 will have fixed price for the whole thing, and it's all coming in within budget. We're working on structural extensions to level 4, which are largely complete. So that new piece of extra space that's being built on levels 3 and 4 is now nearly complete, as you'll be able to see if you go into the Civic Square. And the Civic room, the extra room on the side next to cab, is nearly done as well. The rattle space work around the outside, which in essence is the space required for the building to move on its base isolators in an earthquake, is progressing really well, and that was always challenging from the perspective of knowing what's in the ground around the building. And we are working on new separable portions of the contract for the development and fit out of levels 3 and 4 to meet the Victoria University and National Music School, National Music Centre requirements. So our current focus is primarily on that building, around working with the Victoria University to finalise the requirements and the T's and C's for levels 3 and 4, and understand what the fit out is, and then to contract all of that. A couple of quick images here of Te Matapihi. Both of those images are obviously from the Civic Square, which is why it's important when we open this building that we have that square done at the same time, because otherwise you don't want people walking out to face straight into hoardings. You want them to walk out into a nice space. So that's important that we build that into our plans to happen in parallel. And the next page are some pictures. Sorry about the resolution of these, they're not particularly brilliant when you blow them up, of the main Victoria Street entrance. And you can see there how we're changing the base of those Nico palm plinths, which is something that was important in our discussions with Mana Whenua, to move away from that kind of Greco-Roman imperial style of what we had there to something that is going to be more reflective of Mana Whenua's history in the area. And then finally, some images there from the Harris Street entrance where the police station is. So a significant change to how the building looks from Harris Street. And as you come in on that mezzanine level from Harris Street, there's some very interesting artwork and interior decor that's being designed in consultation with Tihei and Mana Whenua representatives to bring back an iwi feel to the space. Okay, and then finally on Town Hall, again, a very difficult and complex project, as you're fully aware from our briefing and update in October last year. But since then, good progress has been made. The slab pour for the auditorium, the first one of that has been done. Again, that rattle space for when the base isolators come into play in an earthquake is underway. We almost completed the heritage scope and pricing, and we've done the procurement for the NZSO, New Zealand Symphony Orchestra spaces within that building as well. Some of the things that we said we were going to do to improve how that project is progressing in October last year One was to settle a number of the outstanding contract instructions with the builder, Naylor Love. We've done a chunk of those. As we said that we would do in October last year, there's another 300 to 400 of those that we expect to do in the next month or so, and we're negotiating that through with Naylor Love. And most importantly, and I think this is most importantly for the builder, we're working very hard to open up more work faces, which I'll explain in some of the next slides, so that we can speed up the program and manage the costs. The remaining design is intended to be completed by late August, and some of that design is the elements that we talked about in October last year. So, for example, the West Hall, which is the integration into the mob cab building. So that design is hopefully the last piece to be completed, and that will be done in August this year, and that then opens up additional workspaces and work faces for the builder to build. So at the moment, we're anticipating completion of the project in early to mid 2027, but that at the moment, to be completely honest with you, that plan does have a significant amount of risk and contingency in it. If things go well, and if we are to put in place some further mitigations, which we're currently working through at the moment with the project team, the objective is to pull that risk and contingency time back to try and get it back into a 2026 completion. And obviously that opens up, one, the facility to use earlier than we were thinking, and secondly, would help us manage the overall cost of the project as well. So in summary, the project remains within budget. We are looking to bring forward work and opening up further work faces to lock in the staying within the budget for the project. Now, I did mention when we talked about Cab Mob that the time frame of that building is not going to be completed in time to line up with the opening of the town hall, which then gives us a challenge for the front of house requirements for the town hall. When we talked to you in October, we said we had options. We talked about temporary facilities in the square. We talked about the possibility of building an annex on the space. We are working through some alternate options at the moment to do with the MFC, which we think will enable us to avoid both of those two things as well, which further will reduce the budget back from what we talked about in October last year. Okay, I do not want to bore you with details or try and generate any level of complexity in this presentation. However, I do feel it's useful to have a look at these next two slides. What these next two slides represent, and this has been the challenge on the town hall, right? The speed with which we're able to open up work faces for the builder to work on. Ideally, these pictures of ground floor and level 1 would all be either green or blue or white. And white, when it doesn't have a colour read, it's an area that can be worked on. But what I wanted to point out to you is the challenges that we've faced with aspects of the building, which we referred to in October last year, the areas where you can see the orange and the red, where we are still completing design elements of those spaces. And what that does is it slows down the amount of work that can be done by the builder, right? As you can imagine, if that was your house and you only had 2 or 3 rooms that were availably worked on and you had 4 or 5 other rooms that couldn't be, it just slows down how fast the builder can work. It slows down how fast the project can get done and answer the cost. So our focus has very much been, since RCP joined the team and started to use this approach of looking at these workspaces and getting them all to a green status, our focus has been very much focusing on what is causing the red and the orange and getting that back to green as soon as we can. But I just wanted to show you that is the process that we're working through, that is the challenge we've been facing, but we are making progress and we are confident in our plan for Town Hall. And then finally, there are a couple of images of Town Hall. I suspect you've seen some of these before. But just really to remind people that when this is complete, it will bring life back to this part of the city. It will generate interest and passion for the creativity that this space is going to generate. And overall, I hope that you will see that while these pictures are not necessarily the greatest, and they will be much improved when FAST presents the development plan in June, they are going to embody the objectives of the Ngākau framework. And this will become the beating heart of the city once again. Thank you.
Thank you to you and your team for this. There's a lot of good news in here. And I know from my perspective, looking at this, I can see the vision of Te Ngākau and the fact that we'll have it in, 3 years? You know, it'll be a tough 3 years, but that's actually not that long. And we'll just have a wonderful civic centre, which I know Wellington will be proud of. So thank you for this. I'm really excited. But we'll take some questions. I will start with a couple online first. Councillor Wineta.
Kara, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sweet. Hey, thanks for that. Wow, what an incredibly exciting plan. The first thing I wanted to check in on is on cab mob. So mob is to be demolished with cab, is that correct?
Yes, both sites will be demolished. The way that we have been able to progress the cab part of that sooner than the mob part of that, because we really needed to wait to go through this procurement process, and we can't actually finalise that until we have finalised the negotiation with Precinct. So in the meantime, we can proceed with the cab demolition. So cab will be demolished first, but on the assumption that we conclude successfully in negotiation with Precinct, then the contract for the demolition of cab will be extended to mob, and there will be some efficiencies that can be gained by then joining the two together.
Gotcha, understood. Okay, next question. So can you tell me more about the civic elements that are to exist on the ground floor of this preferred development option?
Kia ora, Councillor. The Precinct Properties proposal included a number of spaces that can be used for civic functions. The detail of those civic activities are not clarified. I think that will become part of the negotiation. We have some basically room to demand certain activities through that negotiation process, but yeah, this is at the earliest stage. I think Precinct Properties are open to consider those options for the ground floor and first floor, considering that it was part of the requirements for the town hall that we would have those kind of spaces in the cab and mob site.
Fantastic. Good that we have some influence there. Okay, and then I have just two more, if that's okay.
Yep.
The second to last one is how much of the bridge is being proposed to be demolished? Where would the demolition start? Would it be past the pyramid or prior to the pyramid, like from the steps?
So there is two different structures that they're not connected structurally, but they are functionally connected. One is the former capital E, which the roof of it is part of the bridge, but there's a number of floors underneath. The pyramid sits on top of the former capital E, which is an earthquake prone and a stickered. So if the former capital E is demolished, that pyramid needs to be either relocated or demolished, considering there is a Revi Thompson, who was a very renowned Maori architect, piece of work. So we have to consider that the bridge is basically begins where the road begins, the Jervois Quay. So that's a separate structure, but they connected functionally. So we can't demolish one without the other. Otherwise, the other structure become redundant. You can't use them.
Gosh. Okay, thank you. And final question. I just wanted to check in, firstly, on the civic. There was a council resolution for a civic space to be set aside in the town hall. Just checking that is proceeding, and there's also a civic room in the library as well. Is that correct?
It's correct in such as there are requirements to provide civic space across this set of buildings, and as we work through the design of the various different elements, that will become manifested as to how we actually implement that.
Cool. Thank you. Councillor Pennant.
Thanks for the briefing. I've got a few questions, so if I could just ask 3 and then go back on the list. James, who is the architect for the cab mob site?
So Precinct Properties are working with Warren and Marnie for that site.
Okay, so I was hoping it was a good architect, so it will be a really high quality building.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so it will have offices on how many stories, and then the ground floor and the first floor, it'll be maybe some civic space. Is that correct?
Yeah, what we specified was the importance of the ground floor and first floor, and the fact that that needed to reflect life in the square, so hospitality, potentially retail, the integration with the town hall, potentially civic space, an area that can be used that really integrates with the rest of the precinct. The upper floors, we were open to use on those upper floors, be it commercial office space or residential space, and so that's really for us to work through with Precinct as we flesh out their designs and thoughts.
So just the last question for now. Did we say that residential was okay when we debated this? I can't remember. Can you remind me?
We didn't clarify that residential is okay or not okay, but I understand that from regulatory point of view, considering that Civic Precinct has a lot of civic functions like events and protests, there will be a noise standard applied to that site. So it may make it difficult for residential properties to be developed exactly in that location. That become part of the negotiation process. However, Precinct Properties, I think they have considered hotel or temporary accommodation rather than permanent residential accommodation, which has different standards applied to it.
Okay, yeah, I'd have strong concerns about residential. All right, that's enough for now. Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much for this, James. I have a few questions. First of all, going back to the beginning, you were talking about you selected Precinct as the preferred developer. Now, you said that because they had the lowest risk and investment, so does that mean no risk, or does that mean risk for the council, or there is still some risk for the council?
So the intent is to have no risk and cost for council. Mm-hmm. But until we've concluded T's and C's, it would be very difficult for me to absolutely say that. Mm-hmm. Hence, we're saying it's of the proposals, it's had by far the lowest.
Yep, okay, great, thanks. Now, look at the facilities that we can't actually get because we can't synchronise the town hall finishing with these buildings. I seem to recall that there are the toilets, the kitchen, but what else is there that we need to actually to have?
So there's toilets, kitchens, potentially a bar facility, and a circulation area, because there's not enough circulation space within the town hall building itself for an audience of 1,600, given today's venue standards.
Yep, okay, great. And you're talking about Precinct's generator going on to, was that going on to the first and second floors, or you're talking about which? Yeah.
This was an idea that Precinct Properties suggested to us, is not necessarily confirmed, but they were suggesting that the ground and the first floor would be for hospitality, civic, town hall integration, and from the first floor to maybe third floor, they would have something like generator or the generator or those kind of, startup co-working spaces. That was one of the suggestions or ideas that we can mm-hmm. negotiate on.
Okay, great, that's good, thanks. And I have 2 more questions, is that
That's okay?
Yep. The City Gallery, you talk about a DSA, which is draft structural seismic...
Detailed seismic assessment.
Oh, detailed seismic, okay. So once you actually have that, how easy is it to actually get an assessment for the NBS? Are they very similar? Do they work together, or? Yeah.
So currently we have a draft seismic assessment. the process, basically, we would review the assessment, or we ask for a peer review if we feel that there is questions or a lot of challenges in the assessment. If there is no questions or challenges that we identify, then we can ask the structural engineers to finalize the assessment. Most of the time, the final and the draft are not different. So we have the MBS rating of the gallery, which currently sits at 20%.
Oh, great, thank you. And the last question, actually, I have no last question. Okay, that's great, thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, just continuing on from the City Gallery, you mentioned there's a period there that would be closed in 2025. I might have zoned out. Was there a time period for how long that might have been?
Kia ora, Councillor. So we're looking at commencing work in February 25 and completing 12 months thereafter.
And maybe this is a question for Experience Wellington, but was there sort of any options for where exhibitors might go during that time period if the facility was closed?
I can possibly comment on that while Anna's coming up, because I've had a chat with the Chief Executive recently. They are working on ways to maintain the activation of the City Gallery service in other locations, but it really is for them to finalise those and announce them accordingly. But I think the key is there's an intention not to simply close.
Perfect, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Awesome work, very exciting. Just with the civic, Te Ngākau, how is our understanding of water inundation in the area as we've progressed with this work?
Kia ora, Deputy Mayor. We have done probably one of the most extensive flood analysis on this area. We had done 2 stages of flood analysis. We have updated the Wellington water models, and currently we are going through the 3rd stage, which is even further detailed analysis. We understand there are a number of flood problems, both from the groundwater overflow of the water and also the sea level rise. They are doing more kind of intensive analysis of these issues to ensure that the buildings that we already invested a lot, including Town Hall, are protected and mitigated, but also we are mitigating other wider precinct flooding issues. We have 3 driveways in the precinct that goes to the basement. They are quite exposed to flooding issues, so we have to come up with mitigation solutions. But also, as part of the development plan, we have a consultant from New York who has worked on the flood mitigation in Manhattan. She's working on the flood mitigation, basically solutions to ensure that the precinct is protected in the next 50 years. Thank you.
Wow. Would councillors be able to have a look at that at some stage, just understanding how that's tracking?
Absolutely. I think that will be part of the briefing on the development plan, which is Barbara's.
Yeah, great.
KPI.
Thank you. Yeah, that's important. Just with the town hall and understanding that those front of house options, just what kind of thinking is that going to add to cost on the town hall going back to some of those alternatives?
No, it's very much our focus to make sure that we don't add any further costs to the town hall. So actually we're looking at an option, as I said, by utilising the MFC, which alleviates the need to do those temporary facilities we talked about and that we had included, I think, in that budget last year for like $11 to $12 million, and also alleviates the need to build that annex as well.
Great. So using MFC as the space, perfect. Use what we've got. So just on that, then the town hall budget, just seeing how it's tracking, is there any indication that that might be contained or possibly pulled back with the initiatives that you've put in place, opening out the walls? What do you call them? The work faces? Yeah.
That's definitely the objective of the team, is to try and bring that back, absolutely, and we're working hard on that.
Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora, thank you, James. To Pātai, I just wanted to confirm about the paper coming next week. Is it just to note information, or are you looking for any guidance around decisions?
We're looking for approval to move into a negotiation phase with Precinct Properties.
Yep, cool. And then my second part is just around the plan to mitigate disruption with businesses surrounding Te Ngākau, and if this new information has been communicated yet, or if we're changing any of the conversations or ways we're mitigating.
Kia ora, councillors. Yes, I have met all the businesses within the perimeter of the precinct, so they're all aware of that, and we have sent comms to them, both formal and informal. We had a drop-in session for the residents, so all the body corps around the precinct attended that. They are really well aware of the issues. We are constantly talking to them. Also, I'm working with Anna's team in terms of business support, and also working with Wellington and Z to see how we can support these businesses.
And we have a regular plan to keep them updated with the communication of what's going on, including by sending them documents, but also face-to-face as well.
Cool. Just on that, in terms of the communication of information, so we've received, and within this briefing, there's a lot further detail, just ensuring that they kind of have the opportunity to hear it from y'all first before going public with media or even public with councillors would be my personal preference, but I just wondered how you roll with that so there's no surprises.
Yes, so all the information that they're not commercially sensitive been shared with them, apart from basically the Cabin Mall procurement process that we couldn't share earlier. But in terms of the time frames, the status of the building, the noise levels, the level of disruption from a traffic, both vehicle and pedestrian, they've all been informed basically maybe from 4 to 6 weeks ago. Yeah.
Councillor Pennant.
Thanks. Sorry, so I'm just looking at the handouts from Richard. Is that an indicative building sketch, or is that what it's actually going to look like?
That is a very indicative design, and the developers didn't have much time to actually design their buildings in a more kind of sophisticated way that will be subject to negotiation, but also the regulatory standards of council. So these buildings they will change, and there are significant aspects of the building that we definitely want to have a discussion with Precinct and see how we can get better outcomes for the city.
Sorry, I think that's not a good enough design for such an important space, so I hope that we will get something really good.
It's very much an indicative design for the
okay. Just to make it clear. I mean, I think
it's probably because you're not in the room, but it's very, very clear. And across all the collateral, there's actually a watermark type thing that says indicative.
Okay.
So that's been made clear to
good.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, just that. Yeah, I think there will be a lot of Wellingtonians that would expect it to be a really good building. Okay. The next question I've got is around the City Gallery. So look, James, I've had that discussion with you before. We strengthened it, I think, to quite a high. I was just trying to remember back in 2014 or whatever. So now you're saying that you wanted to get up to 34%. Why would we go so low?
The problem that's emerged in there that reduces the MBS down to such a low level is primarily to do with some interior masonry walls, which are not key to structural integrity and therefore are able to be removed relatively easily. And with the removal of those walls, that MBS would be adjusted up above 34%.
Sorry, so why wasn't it picked up that those walls were a problem back in the 2010s?
Councillor, the building standards changed in 2016 and 17, and these are a number of walls that they haven't been picked up, or they have been picked up as reinforced. But what we did more investigative, basically intrusive investigation into the walls, and the walls are not reinforced, and therefore they bring the MBS rating of the building below 34. But they're very easy to resolve. Basically, we can remove those walls and replace them. Is not a significant and strengthening project.
except we just did it 10 years ago. So, I mean, I guess and you're saying that the cost won't be that high?
No. Our anticipation is that it wouldn't be a costly project. And we can.
What, so $1 million or?
Okay, it's sorry, Councillor. There's a budget in the LTP for remediation of the City Gallery, and the anticipated cost is within that budget.
Okay, are you able to get back to me? Sorry, I mean, is it really clear if I just go back and look at the document?
We're currently scoping the work, Councillor, so yeah, we can come back to you with that information. Yeah.
Okay, that would be help. And obviously, look, that can be part of our lobbying, I presume, because really we shouldn't be strengthening again. And just so the Victoria's got enough money to go ahead with the School of Music. Have they?
We're currently in negotiation with Victoria University, so there's I suspect that kind of question is really commercial in confidence at this point, but certainly the anticipated costs of both the town hall work and the level 3/4 National Music Centre work were well understood and discussed between us and Victoria University when they made the decision that that is something that they wanted to pursue.
Okay, just obviously what has been public is that they've got, they've made lots of people redundant and all the rest of it. Okay. And then just my last question was around the green space. So, so it's supposed to be the same or more, but we haven't got any plan for Jack Islet Green. I was just wondering if you could give me more detail about where your thinking is at with really improving that aspect.
Kia ora, Councillor. As part of the development plan, we are considering a number of options for the precinct, including all the buildings, but also open spaces. So when we present all those options, there will be quite clear cost-benefit analysis in terms of how we can increase the green space, and the councillors can have their say in terms of which approach we would like to take. But in all the scenarios that we are considering, our objective is to increase the net green space of the precinct.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the list. So we actually only have time for one more question, so I'm going to have to ask remaining councillors to email James and the team after this. Councillor Brown. I didn't, sorry. So I'll give it to Councillor Brown, but if you don't mind.
Hey, lucky last. My sort of questions are really about the value proposition which you guys have got in front of you from Precinct. I mean, first question is, are they going to be paying us something are they buying these sites, or is it a lease arrangement? And I'm sort of looking at also from the perspective counter to what Councillor Pennant was just talking about, that when you come back to us for approval, I would definitely like us to be actually recommending that you negotiate the deal which has got the largest possible value to council. So I don't want a whole bunch of kind of silly, unnecessary criteria imposed on Precinct which is going to destroy value for us. And so will you be coming back to us next week with a proposition which is value maximising for council, and how do we know that that's the proposition as opposed to something which there's a whole bunch of kind of extraneous conditions? So the first question is, are we getting some money from them? Are they buying the land? And what's the value? Is it going to be a value maximising proposition next week?
So certainly the intent of the evaluation process was to look for to maximise value for council and to minimise cost and risk. And on that basis, that was why this particular proposal was accepted as the preferred. The elements of I think of your question, Councillor, would be part of the commercial discussions in regards to T's and C's. And the requirement for space or specification of how space is used within the building from council has really been minimised to the extent of what is implied by the Ngākau framework and also required for integration with the town hall. So in other words, we're not intending to overburden Precinct with council requirements for how that building is used, but we are intending to make sure that the building is fit for purpose in terms of the framework and our other objectives for it, such as the integration with the town hall.
Kia ora, Councillor. There's options to either purchase the land or a long-term lease.
Sorry, just a related question. I mean, a lot of office guys, when they're building buildings, they put in car parking. Will they have to put in car parking? Will they be able to use our car park, which is part of the precinct now?
The initial concept plan included a basement car park. I'm sure that would, depending on the due diligence on the ground conditions, that may change in terms of having a basement car park. We will not limit them if they want to have a basement car park because they carry the risk of digging the basement. But if they want to have overground car park, basically, so we can maintain that hospitality active ground floor but have car park on the upper floors, again, we are not planning to burden them with anything beyond the district plan regulations, as well as they meet those district plan design guides. We have very strong design guides in the district plan, and then we have the Ngākau framework, but also we have development plan which guide the design. So there would be enough kind of design controls, but having car park or not most likely sits with precinct and their desire to how they want to market their building.
Thank you, everyone. And councillors, can you please email all your questions to James and the team, and we'll be making a decision at council next Thursday about proceeding to negotiations. But we've been hearing some great feedback from the who you've engaged with on this about the project. So well done. This is some lovely news to receive. So thank you.